Picture a fuel truck driver somewhere in occupied southern Ukraine. It is the middle of the night. He has been on the road for hours. The cab smells like cigarettes and anxiety. On the side of his truck, someone has painted the word milk. Not because the tank is full of milk, because the drone overhead, the one he knows is there, the one he cannot see or hear until it is already too late, needs to believe that it is. He drives slowly. He keeps the headlights low. He is carrying something far more valuable than dairy right now. He is carrying the fuel that keeps an entire military garrison alive. And someone, somewhere on a screen, is watching him. That image, a soldier disguised as a dairy farmer, a weapon disguised as a delivery truck, a war disguised as a supply chain, tells you almost everything you need to know about what is happening right now in southern Ukraine. Because when an army starts painting fake labels on its fuel convoys, it is not adapting, it is improvising. And improvisation in logistics is the first sign that the plan has already failed. Let me tell you what this situation actually is. It is not a breakthrough, it is not a decisive battle, it is something quieter and in many ways more consequential. Over the last 10 days, Ukraine has systematically struck every major land and sea supply route connecting the Russian-occupied mainland to Crimea. 2 bridges destroyed, 1 port declared non-operational. A highway that Russian military planners considered their most protected artery has seen its daily military cargo traffic fall by roughly 71%. Crimea, home to Russian air defense systems, naval assets, occupation garrisons, and tens of thousands of troops, is on a logistics diet the likes of which it has not experienced since Russia seized the peninsula in 2014. The question is not whether this is significant. The question is how significant and where it leads. Today is June 15th, 2026. In the last 10 days, from the night of June 6th through this morning, the tempo of Ukrainian strikes along what Russia calls its Crimea land corridor has tightened, a speed and coordination that has caught even close observers off guard. This is not a single dramatic attack, this is a campaign, and it is still accelerating. This is Professor Zhang. If you follow the economics and logistics of this war, the fuel lines, the supply chains, the numbers that don't make headlines but determine outcomes, this channel is built for you. Subscribe if you haven't. We do not deal in hype here, we deal in cause and effect. So let us follow the money. And to do that, we need to understand the geography, because in this part of the war, geography is destiny. Crimea is a peninsula. It has 3 land entry points. Chonhar, the Heniches crossing over the Arabat Spit, and Perekop near the town of Armyansk, and 1 bridge, the Kerch Bridge over the strait. That is it. 4 choke points for an entire peninsula. And here is the critical piece of context. Russia's Kerch Bridge has been off limits to fuel and hazardous cargo since previous Ukrainian strikes damaged it. The railway ferries that once supplemented supply across the strait have been destroyed by naval drones and are not operating. That means every liter of military fuel, every shell, every spare part for Russian air defense systems in Crimea has been flowing through those 3 land crossings and primarily through 1 highway. That highway is the R-280, which the Russian military calls the Novorossiya route. Russia built it specifically as an overland alternative after the Kerch Bridge became vulnerable. It runs roughly 700 kilometers from Rostov-on-Don in Russia, through Mariupol, through Melitopol along the coast of the Sea of Azov to Crimea. After 2022, it became Russia's de facto strategic lifeline to the peninsula. Russian military planners invested in it, fortified it, and treated it as the insurance policy that made Crimea defensible even if the Kerch Bridge was gone. Before this campaign began, the route was handling something in the range of 3,800 military cargo vehicles per day. That number matters. Hold it. On June 6th, Ukraine's 3rd Special Operations Forces Regiment announced that its drone operators had established what they called aerial control over the Melitopol-Chonhar corridor. The language was precise and deliberate. They were not claiming to have shut the road down. They were claiming to own the airspace above it. And when you own the airspace above a supply route, you can choose when things move and when they don't. The regiment issued a public warning, this is just the beginning. They were not exaggerating. On the night of June 7th, Ukrainian forces struck the Chonhar Bridge, one of the 2 primary crossings into Crimea, with a new weapon that had never been used in combat before. It is called the Behemoth. The name is not accidental. The Behemoth was developed by a Ukrainian company called Culver Aerospace, in partnership with the German defense technology firm Helsing, with production financed by the German government. Its specifications are worth understanding because they explain why this campaign is different from previous Ukrainian bridge strikes. The Behemoth has an operational radius of up to 300 kilometers, a cruising speed of around 170 to 180 kilometers per hour, and it flies at altitudes between 90 and 300 meters, low enough to make radar acquisition extremely difficult. Its warhead is a tandem system, a 40-kilogram high-explosive fragmentation charge followed by a 35-kilogram thermobaric warhead. Total payload 75 kilograms. And its communications run through Starlink. From the moment Ukrainian operators decide to launch, deployment takes between 5 and 7 minutes. Russia closed the Chonhar crossing immediately after the June 7th strike. Satellite imagery showed pontoon bridges being deployed alongside the damaged structure within hours, exactly as Russia did when Chonhar was struck with Storm Shadow missiles in August 2023. Russia has a pontoon playbook, and it activated it fast. But here is what is different in 2026. In 2023, pontoon bridges were a viable workaround because Ukraine lacked the sustained drone capability to keep striking the same location over and over. Today, Ukraine has that capability. On the night of June 9th, Ukrainian forces struck Chonhar again, this time with FP-2 drones, and the Ukrainian military declared the bridge completely out of service. Andriy Kovalenko, who leads Ukraine's Center for Countering Disinformation, stated publicly that the Chonhar Bridge was completely destroyed and that Russian authorities were actively trying to suppress information about conditions in occupied Crimea. The next morning, June 10th, Ukrainian forces struck the hemorrhaging crossing over the Arabat Spit. The Russian-installed Kherson occupation governor redirected all traffic through Armyansk and Perekop. And then before that convoy of redirected trucks could even settle into the new route, Ukraine struck roughly 50 fuel and ammunition trucks concentrated near Armyansk. The intelligence network ATH simultaneously reported a sharp increase in Russian armed pickup columns and machine gun vehicles along the R-280 and near the bridge zones, Russia's reactive defense to the drone campaign. The military escalation and the logistical desperation were happening simultaneously in real time. On the night of June 11th, Ukraine struck 4 more bridges in northern Crimea, 2 over the North Crimean Canal, the Perekop-Armyansk road bridge, and a bridge near Stavki. The occupation governor released entirely new detour routes, but at this point, new detour routes had become a black joke. There was nowhere left to send the convoys that did not put them under the same aerial surveillance that had already destroyed the primary routes. The 3,800 vehicles per day had become 1,100. A 71% collapse in military cargo movement attributed to Robert Brovdy, the commander of Ukraine's unmanned systems forces, in a statement to the Kyiv Independent on June 9th. Brovdy's own words deserve quoting directly, because they are unusually careful. Traffic collapse is not a blockade. But the current diet imposed on this first land corridor, the lifeline of the occupation grouping, is sensitive and effective. Traffic collapse is not a blockade. He knows what he has. He also knows what he does not yet have. We will come back to that distinction. While the bridge campaign was underway, a separate but coordinated operation was eliminating Crimea's maritime logistics alternative. On June 10th, a joint Ukrainian operation involving the 1st Azov Corps, the Security Service of Ukraine, SBU Alpha, and the Unmanned Systems Forces struck the Port of Mariupol simultaneously with the hemorrhaging crossing. The targets were comprehensive: electrical substations, radar equipment, repair facilities, a control tower, fuel storage tanks, and a cargo vessel named the Lady Augusta, a ship linked to Russia's Shadow Fleet that had been operating with its AIS transponder off and its name painted over, carrying cargo that was not officially recorded. The port was declared non-operational. The June 10th timing was not coincidental. Ukraine struck the sea alternative on the same day it struck the second land crossing, closing both options within hours of each other. The effect on Crimea's civilian population, which is also the effect on the military garrison, because the two fuel supplies are intertwined, was immediate and visible. By the end of May, before the June bridge strikes had even begun, Crimean authorities had already rationed gasoline to 20 liters per vehicle per week using prepaid coupons that sold out the same morning they went on sale. Motorists were lining up for hours. Filling jerry cans was banned entirely. The Russian-installed governor of Sevastopol said resolving the shortage would take at least 30 days, and that was his statement before June strikes began. AP and the Moscow Times both described this as Crimea's worst fuel shortage since the annexation in 2014. There is a direct military consequence to this that goes beyond inconvenience. Russia's air defense systems in Crimea. The S-300 and S-400 batteries that protect the peninsula and provide radar coverage require fuel to operate their generators, their radar systems, and their support vehicles. There are no significant strategic reserves on the peninsula. According to analysts, fuel arrives off the wheels and is consumed almost immediately. When the trucks stop moving reliably, the battery's operational cycles are disrupted. You cannot easily sustain a layered air defense network on a 20-liter weekly ration. Now, I want to be honest about what I do not know, and anyone selling you certainty about this situation right now is probably selling you something else too. The status of the hemorrhaging bridge over the Arabat Spit is genuinely disputed. The Russian-installed official saldo stated it remained operational in a reduced capacity, with traffic moving in reverse mode while one lane was repaired. Ukrainian sources called it blocked. As of today, no independent satellite imagery has confirmed the full extent of damage to that specific structure. I am not going to tell you it is destroyed when I cannot verify that. The 71% traffic reduction figure comes from a named Ukrainian military commander speaking on the record, and it is corroborated by satellite imagery showing fewer convoys, but the underlying baseline figure, 3,800 vehicles per day, is not independently third-party verified. It is a credible number from a credible source, and it is the best figure we have. That is different from a confirmed fact. Russia retains the Kerch Bridge for personal vehicle traffic. Private motorists can carry up to 100 liters of fuel per vehicle across the bridge, and speculators are already selling that fuel at double the market price on the other side. Ferry capacity across the Kerch Strait is expected to increase. Ukraine's energy analyst Hennady Ryabtsev, who assessed that Russian oil refining has fallen to levels last seen during the 2009 economic crisis, was careful to add that there is no national-level fuel crisis in Russia. The problem is local to Crimea, and it is the direct result of Ukrainian strikes on logistics. Both things are true simultaneously. Russia has enough fuel nationally, and Crimea is running short locally. Precision targeting of choke points can produce exactly this kind of asymmetric result. Russia has also demonstrated it can adapt under fire. The pontoon bridge at Chonhar appeared within hours of the first strike. Fuel trucks are now disguised as milk tankers and food transporters, which is a real adaptation, even if it is also a sign of desperation. The Ukrainian military itself acknowledged that when Russia began using pontoons, Ukrainian forces had to identify the new routes and strike them too. This is not a static picture, it is a dynamic one, and Russia is not passive. There is something else I want to acknowledge, because it matters to me and it should matter to you. Mariupol is not just a logistics node, it is a city where thousands of Ukrainian civilians died during a months-long siege in 2022. The defenders who made their last stand at Azovstal included the same Azov unit that carried out the June 10th port strike. The symbolism of that is real and it deserves to be named. But I want to be careful not to let symbolic weight substitute for analytical clarity. The port strike was strategically significant because of what it destroyed. The symbolism is separate. Both are true. Now, let me bring this into your world for a moment, because this is not just a Ukrainian story. The global price of oil is shaped in part by perception of supply stability. Russia earns the majority of its war budget from energy exports. When Ukrainian drone strikes push Russian oil refining toward the levels last seen in 2009, and when Russia responds by banning aviation fuel exports for 6 months, those decisions ripple outward. European airlines pay more for jet fuel. Shipping companies recalculate routes and costs. The price at your local pump does not exist in a vacuum disconnected from whether a bridge in occupied Ukraine is standing or not. The war underneath the war is always also the economy underneath your economy. What does the evidence actually show us? It shows us that Ukraine has achieved something real and measurable along Russia's primary Crimea supply corridor in June 2020. The Chonhar Bridge is confirmed destroyed. The Port of Mariupol has been struck into a blackout. Military cargo traffic on the R-280 has fallen dramatically by the most credible available measure. Fuel rationing in Crimea is at its worst point since 2014, confirmed by Russian officials themselves. The Behemoth drone, a new weapon with a 300-kilometer range produced with German government financing, has had its combat debut and performed as designed. What the evidence does not show us, a hermetically sealed blockade. Crimea is not cut off, it is being squeezed. The Kerch Bridge still functions for light traffic. Ferry routes are being expanded. Russia is improvising, and it has improvised successfully before. The Institute for the Study of War assessed on June 11th that Ukrainian forces appear to have achieved a tactical drone overmatch in this theater, and that the effects of the middle-range strike campaign are likely to keep growing unless Russian forces develop countermeasures. That unless is doing important work in that sentence. Russia will try. The outcome is not predetermined. Kyrylo Budanov, the head of Ukrainian military intelligence, described this not as a new operation, but as an ongoing, systematic campaign. The 3rd SOF Regiment said, "This is just the beginning." ISW says, "The effects are likely to grow." That is a coherent picture. It is also a picture that has not yet resolved. The most intellectually honest thing I can say to you today is that we are watching the opening phase of something whose outcome will depend on which side adapts faster in the coming weeks. One analyst quoted by Kyiv Post put it this way, and I want to leave you with this framing because I think it is the right one. The southern theater may become one of the clearest demonstrations in modern military history of how relatively inexpensive autonomous systems can systematically erode the logistical foundations of a much larger conventional force. That is the experiment that is running right now. The Behemoth costs a fraction of what it destroys. The drone operators watching a milk truck at 3 in the morning are cheaper than the Garrison they are starving. The bridge strike costs less than the pontoon bridge built to replace it. If that logic holds, if the cost equation continues to favor the attacker, then the question of who controls Crimea's supply lines may ultimately be answered not by armies, but by accountants. And that is the question I want to leave you with tonight. Because we tend to think of war as a contest of courage and firepower. But what if the decisive variable in this particular theater is not who has the most soldiers or the most missiles, or the most political will, but who can afford to keep replacing what gets destroyed? This is Professor Zhang. I will see you in the next one.